So it's time to kick things into high gear. Macy's Holiday Countdown Sale is here to make last-minute shopping easy with great deals on top gifts like cozy hat, scarf, and glove sets from Coach, Kate Spade, and more for $49.99. Boxed up and ready to give. Easy. So if you haven't gotten to everyone on your list yet, don't be too hard on yourself, but do shop Macy's ASAP. These deals end Thursday. Savings off already reduced prices. Exclusions apply.
This year, American farmers will harvest 2.8 billion bushels of wheat and 15.1 billion bushels of corn. And to this day, American road workers have built 4.2 million miles of roads and counting. We're proud that John Deere machines rolling off the line here in the USA play a part in supporting Americans who work the land and build a better tomorrow. Nothing runs like a Deere. Learn more at johndeere.com/manufacturing.
No way football is played in the fall and winter
because the hits don't hurt as much when you're numb. Get the lowdown on all the sports action coming up right here.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
You are listening to Football Full Circle live right here on the SportsGrid Radio Network in Sirius XM Channel 159. He is Joe Lisi. I am Ben Stevens. That's the mastermind of the pigskin to get you set for a huge football weekend that in full starts on this Thursday night, kicking off Week 16 of this NFL campaign in Los Angeles. Short week Thursday night game between the Chargers and the Broncos. Two divisional foes. No implications, Joe, for the AFC West, as the Kansas City Chiefs have already won that divisional crown for a 9th consecutive year, but huge playoff implications within that AFC wildcard chase, playoff positions, and playoff spots at stake tonight between the Broncos and the Bolts. We'll preview Week 16. All the news that you need around the National Football League. A ton of moving parts at quarterback positions around the NFL. And Joe, we are on the eve of history. The college football playoff, for the first time ever in the 12-team era, begins tomorrow in South Bend. Our first ever on-campus playoff game in the history of the sport. We'll take an early look at the CFP as well here on Football Full Circle.
Yeah, the calm before the storm, per se, right? We had some bowl action kickoff throughout the week, some great games on Monday, and obviously last night, you know, with UNLV and Cal. We have the NFL action today with two teams headed in opposite directions. Denver really peaking at the end of the regular season with their rookie quarterback, Bo Nix, and LA looked like they were on pace for potentially a wild card appearance, but now back-to-back losses to the Chiefs and last week to Tampa Bay. They're reeling offensively and defensively, and we'll see if they can get back on par tonight as a 2.5-point home favorite. And then you mentioned it. History will be made in South Bend tomorrow night under the lights. It's cold. It's snowy. Who will prevail? Will Kirk Signetti with the new do get it done in South Bend this weekend? We'll see. I can't wait for the college football playoff.
Oh, you've noticed that fresh fade on one known as the SIG. He's looking good. The atmosphere deserves it of a fresh fade for a Friday in the first ever college football playoff game in the 12-team era. But Lisi, guy, before we even dive into Thursday night tonight in SoFi, let's go around the rest of the NFL for week number 16. I know you and Scott probably debated this countless times yesterday on Football Full Circle, but it is the big news this week around the National Football League, and we heard from the guys that will be impacted by the decision. Of course, I am referring to the change at quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons, the $180 million man, 100 of that guaranteed. Kirk Cousins now rides the pine in Atlanta, the 8th overall pick in the 2024 NFL Draft this previous April. Michael Penix Jr., now the Falcons' starting quarterback. Lisi, as this is the first time you and I are discussing this subject matter, I ask you first and foremost, entering Week 16 for an Atlanta team at 7-7 straight up, still in the chase for the NFC South divisional crown, did the Falcons make the right call? Did Atlanta make the right decision benching Kirk Cousins and starting Michael Penix Jr.?
Yeah, I think they did. And you just look at the last few performances. Prior to that Monday night performance against Las Vegas, the team had lost 4 straight. Kirk Cousins was a turnover machine, right? And couldn't win the game. And more importantly, couldn't stretch defenses over the top. Statistically, maybe it looked good on paper, but he wasn't putting his team in position to pull those games out. And when you look at the offseason and knowing that they had the best price to win the division, they were a clear-cut contender for a wild card spot, and now they're reeling right now. And you see Baker and Tampa Bay winning, 4 straight games. They had to make a spark and a change, and Michael Penix gives you that added dimension. He's a mobile quarterback. Yep. He can avoid the rush. You're going to take the high highs and the low lows, but this might be the future because it certainly wasn't Kirk Cousins. Look at that performance against a dead Las Vegas team. He throws for less than 150 yards. They need better heading into the playoffs if they're going to be there.
No doubt about it, Joe. And that is the weird thing for the Falcons right now, who snapped that 4-game skid on Monday night in Las Vegas. With the Falcons snapping that 4-game slide, they do have life once again within the NFC South. They trail Tampa by a game, but the Falcons swept the Buccaneers throughout the regular season. Thus, if the two teams were to end up with the same exact record, we don't need to do a lot of tiebreakers. The Falcons have the head-to-head advantage. That would be that. So still very much a chance for this Falcons team to win a divisional championship, which was the expectation with that pricey offseason acquisitions of Kirk Cousins. But, Joe, that's part of this entire story, right? It's not just making a change at the quarterback spot. It's the financial investment into Kirk. It was the odd decision at the time, and frankly still now, to select Michael Penix Jr. 8th overall inside the top 10 after paying a veteran quarterback who was coming back from a torn Achilles, a very significant injury, especially later on in your career, $180 million. Joe, we heard from Raheem Morris, head coach of the Falcons, yesterday. We heard from Kirk Cousins and the new quarterback there in a starting role, Michael Penix Jr. Kirk said a lot of things. We'll get to that in just a moment. But Raheem Morris, Joe, kept most of it close to the vest, obviously, in discussing the decision made by the Atlanta Brass, but basically said, what was the main issue? What was one thing that you could point to for why Kirk Cousins was not going to be your starter moving forward? He basically said turnovers, and it's hard to argue that rationale. In this 5-game streak that we have seen here for Atlanta, 4 straight losses entering Monday night, a narrow win in Las Vegas. Sure, they won. Sure, they even covered as a 5.5-point road favorite, but it was not overly impressive, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Last 5 games for the Falcons, Kirk Cousins, 1 touchdown to 9 interceptions, at least 1 pick thrown in all 5 games. And Joe, in that 4-game skid, 0 touchdowns tossed by Kirk to 8 INTs. It does make sense that they have made this change based on how turnover worthy Kirk Cousins was playing.
Yeah, and think about if they are to make the playoffs, right? You can't have 130 yards and multiple turnovers. You can't have a quarterback that's under the pressure and can't get out of his own way because he's an aging veteran coming off an Achilles. You just can't have it. You're not even going to go and win a game in terms of that type of situation. And it's not just the turnovers, Ben. It is just the reads and progressions. At times, Kirk Cousins does look confused. He says he hasn't forgotten how to play football, but go back to that game against Minnesota. Go to the game before that. He's throwing the football into double and triple coverage. I mean, that's a rookie mistake. You would expect that out of Michael Penix, not a guy making $50+ million a year and potentially going to lead your team to an NFC championship. So again, this team is a mess. This looks exactly the way it did last year with Des Ridder and Arthur Smith. There's no difference between 2023 and 2024 as far as I'm concerned.
And Joe, let's call it what it is, right? After the offseason acquisition of Kirk Cousins and the payment and the financial investment that went into it, our question was not, are the Falcons going to be a winning team? It was, hey, Atlanta's going to win a bad NFC South. Are the Falcons a true contender with Kirk Cousins at the QB spot to win the NFC? They are trying to fight for their lives now with a rookie quarterback about to make his first start to even stay in the hunt for that NFC South crown. Kirk Cousins was at the podium yesterday, talked about how he called Michael Penix Jr., said, quote, "I like to shoot elephants in the room, so I just wanted to shoot one," told Michael Penix Jr. that he would be in his corner. The quarterback out of Washington, the 8th overall pick, by the way, via Bloomington, Indiana, said he was at Costco buying a hot dog on his rookie salary when he got the call from his head coach, Raheem Morris, that he was now the starting QB in Atlanta. What is the Falcons' outlook for the remainder of this season? Starting this Sunday, what is Kirk Cousins' future in the NFL beyond this year? That's what we'll discuss up next on FFC.
Ball is coming.
Don't look like an idiot at work.
Know your stuff.
Football and everything else.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
The International Brotherhood of Teamsters said workers at 7 Amazon facilities will begin a strike this morning, an effort by the union to pressure the e-commerce company for a labor agreement during a key shopping period. The Teamsters say the workers who authorized strikes in the past few days are joining the picket line after Amazon ignored a December 15th deadline the union set for contract negotiations. Amazon says it doesn't expect an impact on its operations during what the union calls the largest strike against the company in U.S. history. On Wednesday, the Justice Department unsealed a civil complaint alleging CVS Pharmacy and various subsidiaries filled unlawful prescriptions in violation of the Federal Controlled Substances Act. The complaint also says CVS sought reimbursements from federal health care programs for such prescriptions in violations of the False Claims Act. A representative of CVS says the company has cooperated with the DOJ's investigation for more than 4 years and strongly disagrees with the allegations and what it called the false narrative within the complaint. I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
This year, American farmers will harvest 2.8 billion bushels of wheat and 15.1 billion bushels of corn. And to this day, American road workers have built 4.2 million miles of roads and counting. We're proud that John Deere machines rolling off the line here in the USA play a part in supporting Americans who work the land and build a better tomorrow. Nothing runs like a Deere. Learn more at johndeere.com/manufacturing.
Not to brag, but Progressive's Name Your Price tool is mankind's greatest tool ever. Even better than the wheel. Sure, without the wheel, we wouldn't have modern transportation or funny videos of dogs riding skateboards. But without the Name Your Price tool, we wouldn't have easy access to auto insurance options based on our budget. And, well, cars do need wheels. They also need insurance, and insurance never goes flat. Learn more about the greatest tool ever, the Name Your Price tool at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Fall is almost here.
It's time to stow the lawnmower and get ready for all that glorious action coming your way. Stay tuned to SportsGrid for all the strategies, angles, and info you need to get the winning edge. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
So much that goes into the conversation around the Falcons' decision now to start the rookie Michael Penix Jr. entering Week 16 with an NFC South divisional crown still on the line, and then what becomes of the contract and Kirk Cousins moving forward, not just with the Falcons franchise, Joe, but his future after year 13 in the NFL and beyond. Let's start with Atlanta. At home on Sunday, Joe, they host the 2-win New York Giants, a lifeless G-Men team that turns it back over once again based on injury to Drew Lock as the starting quarterback. The Atlanta Falcons could not have picked a better spot at home for the rookie quarterback, Michael Penix Jr., to make his first career start. But it's not Week 6 or Week 2. It's Week 16 in the hunt for a divisional crown. The Falcons an 8.5-point favorite, Joe, against the New York Giants. They will enter Week 16 trailing Tampa by a full game in the win-loss standings within the NFC South. Do you give the Falcons any life of trying to claim that divisional championship?
I mean, a little life. I still like Tampa, and the reason why I like Tampa overall is because they're balanced. They have the veteran quarterback playing well with Baker, Mike Evans playing lights out with a $159 and 2 touchdowns, and the rushing attack. You know, we talk about it. Last year, 89 yards per game. This year, $138. They could take over in the second half the way they did on the road against LA. And again, Michael Penix might win this game against New York, but I'm just not sold on the complete just continuity of this team offensively and defensively. And I just can't buy in. The more complete team to me is Tampa. But that being said, I mean, he should dominate the New York Giants. That line, though, Ben, is indicative of like what? Winning. It's almost indicative of like a similar performance to what we saw Lamar Jackson. And I know that was a 17-point number, but I mean, first start and we're given over a touchdown. I would take the points with New York. I don't love it, but I would still take the points with the Giants.
Yeah, I'm not going to bet the side in this game. Would the number be 10.5 if it was Kirk Cousins? Would it be less? I'm not entirely sure. It does feel like a very strong line for a quarterback that is making his first career start in a mounting pressure situation. Now, I love Michael Penix Jr. I loved him at Bloomington. I loved him in Seattle in his 6 years of college football. He is not your average rookie. He is not a developmental piece. He is 24 years old. Obviously, the Falcons have enough trust in his left arm to lead them to a potential playoff bid. But with that being said, Joe, even if they beat the Giants, and even if they win by a touchdown and do not cover, I'm not picking Atlanta to win the next week in Washington against the Commanders. Well, the Commanders will still very much need that game. And, Joe, part of that is reflected in the prices then in the NFC South. The reason the Falcons even have a chance is because they swept the Buccaneers earlier this season, but Tampa is still minus 390 to claim the divisional crown. Both teams expected to win on Sunday. The Bucs a shorter favorite, though, on the road, just 3.5 points against the Cowboys. But you're going to Dallas, which has been the opposite of a house of horrors. And I think the Cowboys are getting far too much love from the odds makers just because they beat the Panthers outright as an underdog. I love the Buccaneers in that spot. All to say, Joe, when all is said and done, invaluable experience for Michael Penix Jr. Still give me the Buccaneers to win the NFC South.
Well, yeah, right. I agree with that assessment. So get Michael Penix wet in regards to get his feet wet, against the Giants, right? I know. Yeah. Get his feet wet against the Giants, right? Get that game experience, and then hopefully he's ready for the bigger stage with more playoff implications on the line. Granted, they need to win this game no matter what. I get that. But I expect Bijan Robinson to carry the load just the way he did on terms of Monday night. Feed Bijan 20 to 25 times with Algier in terms of the rushing attack. Grind it out and then see what you can do. But it still comes down to, here's the other thing. We don't talk about the defense enough. And I understand they held the Las Vegas Raiders to basically 12 points. But at the end of the day, they still, in the second half of that game, allowed Des Ridder and that lifeless offense to almost potentially get within striking distance. So, big picture, it's Tampa Bay or bust. Tampa Bay's front seven, too. If you watch that game against the Chargers, battered Justin Herbert. And that's another added dimension why Tampa Bay should win the division handily.
So, Joe, I think we were all rightfully skeptical of why a team that just paid a veteran quarterback $180 million over a 4-year deal with $100 million guaranteed, why they would then use their 8th overall pick in the NFL draft to draft a quarterback that would be his heir apparent, despite guaranteeing a 4-year deal. And there might be some that now say, well, all of you talking heads, do you see? That's why you draft Penix 8th overall. In fact, I still think it's a disaster and it's a failure because, Joe, one of the reasons that in a vacuum, this draft selection was so strange is because if you thought that Kirk Cousins was your guy and even 2 to 3 years of success within this deal would be worth it with all the financial investment, then you never draft Michael Penix Jr. If you thought Kirk Cousins might be the ailing 36-year-old quarterback recovering from a torn Achilles and can look like the version that we have seen this year in his 13th NFL season, and then you draft Michael Penix Jr., you never paid Kirk Cousins in the first place for a 4-year, $180 million deal with $100 million guaranteed. It still is a disaster for this Falcons franchise, regardless if Michael Penix Jr. is good and the Falcons win on Sunday.
Right. So it looks like there was definitely some, joggling in regards to the internal discussions, whether it be Arthur Blank wanted Cousins, or Fontenot and that team and the organization from the football standpoint wanted a younger quarterback in Michael Penix. But at some point, the reason why they fired Arthur Smith is because they couldn't get over the hump. So where was Kirk Cousins, going to put you over the hump when, again, all these concerns in the offseason crept up? It's a terrible situation to have because this team is not going anywhere. They're stuck in neutral, and I don't think it changes anytime soon, Ben. They might fire Raheem Morris at the end of the year, too.
They already dismissed him once as the interim head coach, where he did not get the job after taking over for Dan Quinn. A lot to be determined, and still more on Kirk Cousins' future, if he still has one in the National Football League, and what that looks like up next on Football Full Circle.
There's smart.
And there's not smart.
Not smart is hope as a strategy. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Keep it here.
And win. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. The SportsGrid Radio Network presents This Date in Sports History.
In 1980, The Raging Bull is released, directed by Martin Scorsese and starring Robert De Niro as boxer Jake LaMotta.
Hey, Ray. Never went down, Ray. You never got me down, Ray.
LaMotta's brawls with Sugar Ray Robinson were legendary, as the two clashed 6 times in the ring, with Sugar Ray taking 5 of the bouts. For SportsGrid Radio, I'm Mike DeMurgis.
The Technology Minute with George Capalbo.
'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the smart house, not a circuit was stirring, not even a mouse. The children were nestled all snug in their beds. Visions of iPhones danced in their heads. Then arose such a clatter of sensors and lights. From the chimney sprang jolly old Saint Nick. He was chubby and plump, dressed in glowing LEDs from his head to his foot. It flashed and sputtered as he brushed off the soot. Suddenly, a bundle of toys and a motorized gizmo rolled out to a stop. I laughed when I saw this in spite of myself. Then a hatch popped open, and a robot arm went straight to its work, filling all the stockings. And laying a finger aside of his nose, giving a nod, his jetpack blazing up the chimney he rose. Away they flew, chased by a live streaming drone that rose from the thistle.
Christmas to all of you.
Follow me at Chico Palvo on Twitter and stay tuned to The Technology Minute for more cool stuff like this.
Pharrell, Coast to Coast.
Is there anyone more Madame Tussauds than Antonio Pierce? My man is like a wax doll, standing on the sidelines, staring into the abyss of his crappy coaching career in the NFL. He's no more of an NFL coach than I am. He is terrible. I'm not wrong. I will argue until I'm blue in the face.
It's Pharrell, Coast to Coast with Scott Farrell. Weekdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. On the home of the winning edge, the SportsGrid Radio Network. Wherever you go,
There you are.
download the SportsGrid mobile app and we'll be right there with you.
So now you can get the winning edge.
Anywhere.
Even while the wife's talking to you.
If you got an earbud.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
So now we look at what is going to happen to Kirk Cousins, not only in Atlanta, but maybe beyond in his NFL future. Joe, there is the monetary aspect of this conversation as well. All right, the Falcons have made their change at quarterback. What becomes of Kirk in the A? Well, even if the Falcons want to release Kirk Cousins following June 1st at a later date this offseason and summer, it's still a $40 million dead cap hit. That doesn't sound all that desirable, but it might be something the Falcons want to do. Even, Joe, if they can garner up enough interest for a quarterback that will turn 37 and has not looked very good post-Achilles tear in 2024 by the time we get to the next season, they would still have to take on some of the contract if they trade him after June 1st. $12.5 million is what Atlanta is in stake for. Joe, let me ask you the question rather simply. Do you think Kirk Cousins will be a starting quarterback for a team, the Falcons could be included, just an NFL team to begin week number 1 of 2025?
If I had a bet right now, I would say no. And the reason why I say that now is because I think this is a tipping point. And you and I have had this conversation about, these exorbitant amount of salaries in terms of the NFL for aging veterans. It's no different than Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers is much older, playing at a better level than Kirk Cousins right now. And where's he going to be starting in 2025, right? The question remains, these players are making $50, $60 million. You take that on, where is the ROI? Where is the return on investment for these players? And when you see backups like Sam Darnold and some of the other players that are on the cheap, I keep going back to Baker Mayfield. That salary is $30 million a year.
Yeah.
He's winning the division. He's won playoff games. So organizations are going to look at this at some point and go, it's not worth it. It's not worth the risk. It's risk mitigation. I'd rather go with a younger guy on the cheap, and hopefully we can fill it out across the roster and say, you know what? We'll be a 500 club or, a wild card contender that way, as opposed to just putting all your eggs in one basket and these guys failing time and time again.
And it's why you should never do what the Falcons have done and play the angles both ways. Sign the expensive veteran and draft a rookie, because even in the best case scenario, let's say Kirk Cousins had been great for 2 years. The Falcons won the division, both of them. They made it at least to the divisional round at some point. Then you would have to determine for Michael Penix Jr. entering year number 3 if you wanted him to be the starter, because the end of that season, you have to make the decision on if you are going to pick up his 5th-year option to even make his rookie deal worth it for a guy that would have been 26 or 27 years old. Again, the Falcons have failed. There is still some football life to be had for Atlanta and maybe Kirk Cousins beyond. Joe, I'm not sure the Falcons have a robust trade market or even just simply a trade market for Kirk Cousins this offseason. I don't know who would want that financial investment. I don't know who would want to take on any bit of that burden of that large deal for what we have seen out of Kirk Cousins. Do I think he will start another NFL game at some point? Yes. Do I think he will be traded for as the starter? I'm not entirely sure, and it's why the Falcons are in a bad financial position to take on a huge dead cap hit either way.
Yeah, and think about the young guys on that team, right? You have a young roster for the most part outside now the quarterback, your starting quarterback. And I know Penix is starting this week, but up until this point with Kirk Cousins. And there's similar situations across not just Atlanta, though, Ben. What about Cleveland in that situation? Look at Dallas with Dak Prescott, how much they paid him. Look at the New York Jets. I mean, when does it stop? And that's why I think Atlanta made a terrible decision. They should have looked themselves at, they should have had to sit down, whether Blank made that decision or not, and said, hey, Kirk Cousins is not going to bring us over the top. Look, here's the bottom line. If we're just judging performance, what has Kirk Cousins done in the postseason that warrants or garners him being worth $50 million for the Atlanta Falcons? All right, granted, you could have gotten a backup quarterback to win the division in the NFC South. You almost did it with Des Ritter, a rookie or a second-year guy. Why couldn't you get a quarterback like Sam Darnold to take you over the hump and you had extra money left over?
It has been a season well below expectation in the A, but again, still a path right now to being a playoff team in winning the NFC South. We'll talk about Patrick Mahomes. Is he going to play on Saturday? Other injury news before we preview the start of Week 16 and Thursday night in LA. Up next.
The winning edge.
You've got it.
But not everybody has it, because not everybody listens to us.
But we're working on that.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Progressive presents the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders. Saturday afternoon, big matchup for the Chiefs when they host the Texans. Kansas City's 13-1 overall, 7-0 at home. The Texans are 9-5 this season, 4-3 away from home. It's a 1 Eastern, noon Central kickoff at Arrowhead. The Chiefs have already clinched the AFC West. Houston's riding a 2-game winning streak and has already wrapped up the AFC South. Patrick Mahomes was a full participant at Wednesday's practice. The Chiefs quarterback suffered a high ankle sprain last Sunday.
The work that we've gotten in, obviously it's a short amount of time, but I thought we had a good day.
On the schedule tonight in Los Angeles, the 8-6 Chargers host the 9-5 Broncos. Denver riding a 4-game winning streak. They're second in the AFC West. The Chargers have lost 2 straight and sit third in the division. Wednesday bowl games, UNLV beat Cal 24-13 at the LA Bowl. Boca Raton Bowl, James Madison 27-17 over Western Kentucky. Bundle auto and home, renters or condo, and save with Progressive. That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
I love spreading joy with gifts this time of year, but I try not to spread my budget too thin. Luckily, Kohl's has come through for me once again. I just went and used a 25% off coupon to score so many great gifts under $20, like cozy pajamas and fleece, amazing gift sets, and beauty must-haves. So if you're looking to give more for less this season, get to Kohl's. Select styles. Offers end December 24th. Some exclusions apply. See store or Kohl's.com for details.
Flo here from Progressive to tell you how you get more than great savings with us. You get customer service access through our mobile app, online chat, or by phone.
That's a lot of ways I can get in touch with you. I see what's going on here. You can't name favorites, but I'm your #1 customer.
Actually, we offer all our customers these ways to contact us.
I'm sure you give just any customer your personal
company
contact info.
Well, you did call us more than any other customer this year. So in that sense, you are our #1 customer.
Get help from Progressive through the website, app, chat, or phone. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates.
Days are getting cooler
and shadows are getting longer.
You know what that means.
It's football weather. So bundle up and keep it here for all the latest strategies and gridiron information.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on FFC, he is Joe Lisi, I am Ben Stevens. Week 16 and the NFL starts tonight in Los Angeles between the Broncos and the Chargers. Joe, before we get to this Thursday night game, some important practice updates to enter Week 16. None more notable, perhaps, than that of Patrick Mahomes. A high right ankle sprain, mild albeit, is what KC called it after their 2-touchdown win in Cleveland on Sunday, but very much putting the status of Mahomes for the remainder of this regular season, at least this upcoming Saturday or the week beyond, on a short week on Christmas in Pittsburgh, in doubt, thus putting the Chiefs' chances of holding on to the #1 overall seed in the AFC very much in doubt. Only for Mahomes to practice in full already twice this week by Wednesday to get ready for the Saturday game hosting the Houston Texans. Part of the reason, Joe, that the high ankle sprain seemed as significant as it did is because the Chiefs, including their game in Cleveland on Sunday, are playing 3 games in a 10-day span that could decide their playoff outlook. And now it seems that a high ankle sprain isn't all that severe, and Mahomes is even just optimistic he will play in resting his ankle on the sideline this week, but he's been at practice in full. The Chiefs now a 3.5-point home favorite against the Texans on Saturday.
Yeah, so a couple things, and I talked about this with Scott yesterday. You know, they have to win 2 of the next 3 to solidify the #1 seed. And I understand Pat Mahomes is your main component. As Pat Mahomes goes and he's under center, obviously you have a 90% chance to win. I get that. But if you put him under center, whether he wants to play or not this week, and somehow, some way, he gets hurt, now you run the risk of not just losing the #1 overall seed, but then he might not be ready for the playoffs. So he might be practicing, but if I was the Chiefs, Ben, I would put Carson Wentz under center this week, even though it's Houston, and have Pat Mahomes under center for the Steelers and Broncos, so that way he's ready. Here's the thing. Bottom line, I don't care who plays quarterback. This game comes down to points for me. I love the over. It's one of my best bets of the weekend, 41.5. I don't care if Wentz is under center. I don't care if Mahomes is under center. What I do know is that I expect C.J. Stroud and the Texans coming off that win against the Miami Dolphins to push tempo, challenge that defense, and I think we get points aplenty, baby. Points, points, points. 50+. You're going to have a good old-fashioned shootout in Arrowhead Saturday afternoon with Penn State and SMU battling it out as well.
I mean, that's a Joe Mo play opposite Joe Poe if I have ever heard it. I actually kind of thought the Chiefs at +2.5 as a slight home dog with Carson Wentz would be a plucky group that could pull off the upset against a Texans team that clinched the AFC South for a second consecutive year a weekend ago. Not that Houston doesn't have anything to play for or doesn't want to be playing its best football in these final 3 weeks to be ready for a home playoff game come early January, But more than likely, Joe, they're pretty much solidified in that 4 spot based on where things are around the AFC playoff picture. They would need something monumental in the final 3 weeks to surpass either the Steelers or the Ravens for the 3 spot with only 3 weeks remaining. But it is really impactful, Joe, to see Patrick Mahomes back at practice. And to your point about the injury, now I don't really know. How injured was he? Because what I mean by that, I'm not questioning the Chiefs' doctors or Andy Reid or Patrick Mahomes or calling him a faker by any means. But even if the guy had an ankle sprain, let alone a high ankle sprain, and still was hoping to play on Sunday, you think he would be sitting at practice just to get ready to go. Limited participant, did not practice, but maybe, just maybe, we'll keep him active to hope that he is ready in pregame warmups, even with the indication one way or the other in the week leading up to it. Joe, he's not wearing a walking boot walking around the facility. He's at practice in full. He is going to play on Saturday. That's the indication right now. Again, the Chiefs were a 2.5-point home dog with his status uncertain. They are now a 3.5-point favorite, at home. The Texans, a really good underdog team with C.J. Stroud, 9-5 against the spread since the beginning of last season. And then, Joe, we take it one step further. The Chiefs now a minus 260 favorite to be that number 1 overall seed. Even if Mahomes had never been injured and was completely healthy, still a difficult stretch for KC to end out the year. 2 games within a 5-day span, both on short weeks in the final 3 weeks of the season, and then a game on the road in Mile High against the Broncos. We'll see what Denver needs in that Week 18 finale based on their playoff implications. So ultimately, Lisi Guy, if Mahomes plays on Saturday and is relatively healthy throughout the remainder of this regular season, who ends up the 1 seed in the AFC, KC or Buffalo?
Oh, it's still KC. I mean, even if he doesn't play, right, I still like their chances a lot against the Steelers in Denver. And that is the one thing. I think when you look at the performance against Cleveland, right, that defense really carried them. They jump out 21-0. They hold on 21-7. They continuously pressure Jameis Winston and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, shut down the rushing attack outside the big touchdown run by Jerome Ford for much of the game. I mean, Nick Bolton and that crew were flying to the football. So I still like their chances to just win through the next 2 out of 3 games, no matter who starts this week. I still like them because think about Pittsburgh, right? I mean, think about the run that the Steelers have had, right? Very physical game against the Eagles. They now go back on the road against Baltimore. That's a toss-up game. Then they would have to play Kansas City. Kansas City, in my opinion, would be ripe to just win that matchup. And then Denver with Bo Nix, granted, you won in your house very narrow against Denver, but I still like that defense going into Mile High to get the upset or get the victory over Denver if needed. So I still think the minus 260 is a great number for KC moving forward.
And what Lisi Guy laid out is exactly that. If the Chiefs win 2 of their final 3, it does not matter that Buffalo won the regular season matchup or has the head-to-head tiebreaker in front of KC. The Chiefs win 2 of their last 3, they're good. If the Chiefs were to drop 2 of their last 3 and Buffalo wins out, then the tiebreaker becomes the difference. We'll see if that matters at all. Lisi Guy, more injury news for a team in a monumental matchup on Saturday on a short week. TJ Watt left the end of the Steelers game against the Eagles this past Sunday with an injured ankle. He's been a limited participant at practice. George Pickens has not practiced yet this week, but is trying to work his way back for a huge game that might decide the AFC North on Saturday. Pittsburgh visits Baltimore. The Ravens right now a 6.5-point home favorite.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is tough because you know how close these games are. Pittsburgh gets the win earlier in the year, and we see a 6.5. Is it based off the fact that it's back-to-back road games? Is it based off the fact that just the algos and the books believe, Baltimore's performance where they cover by 17 on the road was that dominating? I don't know. I would still take the points with Pittsburgh, Ben. A little reluctant because the line is a little bit fishy. But what I find even more intriguing is the total, because we've seen these games trend under. Last time they played in Pittsburgh, 48.5, and it was a dead under, right? The last 8 meetings have been averaging around 30.8 points per game, and now we see a 45.5, no real regression. I like the over in that game, too. I love both overs on Saturday. I do. But I love Kansas City's more, but I still like the over in Baltimore.
This guy loves some points everywhere on Saturday. It might
could
seem
be the bag before Christmas and the holidays. You never know.
Could be even in the college football playoff triple header that we'll look at tomorrow with a little bit of a preview today. Lisi guy, this game might decide the AFC North. Pittsburgh has the upper hand right now in the standings and in the head-to-head. Baltimore wins. The head-to-head is the same. The division record's the same. The overall record's the same. The Ravens plus 130 to win the AFC North. Pittsburgh, the odds-on favorite. More FFC up next.
Yeah, it's getting cooler.
Football weather is here.
Stay tuned for all the latest odds, strategies, and info. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
The International Brotherhood of Teamsters said workers at 7 Amazon facilities will begin a strike this morning, an effort by the union to pressure the e-commerce company for a labor agreement during a key shopping period. The Teamsters say the workers who authorized strikes in the past few days are joining the picket line after Amazon ignored a December 15th deadline the union set for contract negotiations. Amazon says it doesn't expect an impact on its operations during what the union calls the largest strike against the company in U.S. history. On Wednesday, the Justice Department unsealed a civil complaint alleging CVS Pharmacy and various subsidiaries filled unlawful prescriptions in violation of the Federal Controlled Substances Act. The complaint also says CVS sought reimbursements from federal health care programs for such prescriptions in violations of the False Claims Act. A representative of CVS says the company has cooperated with the DOJ's investigation for more than 4 years and strongly disagrees with the allegations and what it called the false narrative within the complaint. I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
This year, American farmers will harvest 2.8 billion bushels of wheat and 15.1 billion bushels of corn. And to this day, American road workers have built 4.2 million miles of roads and counting. We're proud that John Deere machines rolling off the line here in the USA play a part in supporting Americans who work the land and build a better tomorrow. Nothing runs like a Deere. Learn more at johndeere.com/manufacturing.
Not to brag, but Progressive's Name Your Price tool is mankind's greatest tool ever. Even better than the wheel. Sure, without the wheel, we wouldn't have modern transportation or funny videos of dogs riding skateboards. But without the Name Your Price tool, we wouldn't have easy access to auto insurance options based on our budget. And, well, cars do need wheels. They also need insurance, and insurance never goes flat. Learn more about the greatest tool ever, the Name Your Price tool at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Ask any player and they'll tell you any advantage is important.
That's where we come in.
SportsGrid delivers gaming strategies and analysis 7 days a week.
The winning edge.
It's your advantage to more winning
more often.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
Week 16 of the 2024 NFL regular season kicks off tonight in Los Angeles. A divisional duel between familiar foes, but no actual stakes for a divisional title on the line because in the AFC West, it's been all KC the last 9 years. But the Broncos and the Bolts square off tonight, Joe, in a huge Thursday night game nonetheless because of its implications for the AFC playoff picture. Both teams firmly in the wild card spots at this moment. Denver, 9-5, is the 6th seed currently in the AFC. The Chargers, 8-6, occupy the third and final wild card spot, that last of 7 postseason positions within the AFC. LA, 2.5-point home favorite tonight against Denver. A total stands at 41.5. Joe, the odds makers expecting close, competitive, albeit a low-scoring football game. What say Joe Mo?
Yeah, I lean to the Chargers, Ben, but again, I don't love the game because they're not playing well right now. Justin Herbert has been under pressure considerably. The wide receiver core is decimated outside Josh Palmer and Quentin Johnson. Ladd McConkey's been banged up. Disley's out. So what are you going to get out of Stone Smart and the rest of the offense? And think about how that game played out last week. If you're, Tampa Bay, you wanted to push tempo. LA couldn't match that, right? And that's the thing. So they can't get into a shootout. It has to play out, in my opinion, more what we saw a couple of weeks ago on the road in KC. Lower scoring game, run the football with Edwards and Vidali. What's his name? Vidal, and then get it done. Vidali, and then get it done. He's number 30. I know he's number 30. That's all I care about.
Stop trying to make Kamani Vidal, the running back out of Troy.
He's Italian.
Alongside Lisi having Sunday sauce.
If he's eating with me, he's Italian. But that's the way the game's got to play out. And even though the Chargers have the number 1 ranked scoring defense, they've been abused in some games, right, by passing attacks.
Yeah.
A lower scoring game. I again, hesitantly laying to the favorite, but I don't love it. I like the under a little bit more.
I was kind of going to be on the under, Lisa guy. Here's some intel for you, just so you know. Made the public poll that we do every day on the early line. All the options out there, pretty tight between the Chargers as the slight home favorite, the Broncos getting a few on the road, in the under of 41.5. By far the least selected option from the public bettors was the over of 41, and a real Joe Po type of situation unfolding once again. Lisa, guy, to your point about the Chargers, though, early this season, first year of Jim Harbaugh in Los Angeles, he told you alongside his former and now new offensive coordinator, Greg Roman, too much pressure. Too much has been placed on Justin Herbert in his first 4 years in the NFL. We are going to take the onus off of him. We are going to dominate up front. We are going to run the damn ball, and we are going to do so efficiently. And they really did in the opening 2 months or so of this season. Joe, under in 7 of 8 games to start for LA, but now over in 4 of the previous 6. To your point about the defenses, 3 teams around the NFL tied for the best scoring defense in all of the National Football League, allowing the fewest points possible, 17.6 points per game to the opposition. That's the Broncos, the Chargers, and the Eagles. But Denver's been in a few shootouts as of late. In fact, Denver, in its 14 games this year, has gone over 8 times with a push mixed in. We just told you about the Chargers. And LA, Joe, has lost 3 of their last 4. In 3 of their last 5, they've allowed at least 27 points. 27 to the Bengals, 30 a few weeks ago in the Harbaugh against John Harbaugh and the Ravens. And last week got absolutely boat raced by the Buccaneers, giving up 40, Tampa scoring 27 unanswered in the second half. I'm kind of leaning my way to an over based on fading the public because we don't need 50 points. We need 42. But I will tell you, Joe, my best bet for this game, that's Cortland Sutton, over 62.5 receiving yards. To your point, this Chargers secondary, in those games where they have given up some points, 27 to the Bengals. Joe Burrow threw for 356. 40 last week to Baker and the Bucs. Baker nearly 300, 288 in 4 passing touchdowns. The game they gave up 30 to the Ravens, Lamar only had $177. It's because Derrick Henry ran it for 140 yards. The Broncos don't really have a lead back. Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, whoever it is going to be, Audric Estime, the rookie out of Notre Dame. And Joe, the story for the Chargers is also the fact they don't really have a lead back. Your Italian, Kamani Vidal, or in that lead spot right now, Gus Edwards, the pride of the Garden State from Rutgers University. But Lisa, guy, why I go to Cortland Sutton again is because if I think Bo Nix is going to flirt with this number of 223.5, Cortland Sutton is his guy. Even last week, Bo Nix threw for just $130 against Indianapolis. Sutton was the leading receiver. 9 targets, only 3 grabs, still 32 yards. The 6 previous games before last week's slow offensive outing out of Denver, Cortland Sutton at least 70 yards in 6 consecutive. I think Cortland Sutton will have a decent enough night in a night we're not expecting a ton of offense.
I could tell you from just betting secondary wide receivers with Denver over the past couple of primetime matchups that he just zeroes in on Cortland Sutton. Whether he's covered, not covered, Bo Nix goes automatically to Cortland Sutton. So it's a good look, 62.5. The running backs are interesting because it is a 3-headed monster, and it seems like Sean Payton never goes to the hot hand in back-to-back weeks. So, if Javonte Williams breaks out one week, it's never Javonte Williams the following week. It's McLaughlin or Aldrick Estime. And, even though they get some touches, it's very hard to zero in on the right guy. I think when we're looking at the running backs, the one thing that stood out to me in terms of the market last night when I broke down the game, Gus Edwards plus 190 anytime touchdown. He's a bigger back than Vidal in terms of goal line situations. Do we really believe Justin Herbert is going to throw touchdowns on that defense? Probably not. Give me Gus Edwards plus 190 tonight.
Justin Herbert doesn't really turn the football over. He only has 2 interceptions this year, including one last week against the Buccaneers. But, Joe, just 4 games, only 4 this year, Herbert has had multiple passing touchdowns. We'll come back on the other side of the break and take a look at history. Tomorrow, the first ever 12-team college football playoff begins. Next.
The boys of summer become the champions of fall.
The World Series is on its way.
And SportsGrid brings you every angle. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. SportsGrid TV and radio networks are the premier streaming video and audio channels dedicated to serving the sports wagering audience. Found on major smart TV platforms and streaming on SportsGrid Radio and Sirius XM Channel 159. SportsGrid's real-time data, expert commentary, and entertaining analysis transform viewers into informed sports enthusiasts. Our weekday radio lineup begins with the early line at 8 a.m. Eastern with Ben Stevens and Donnie Rightside. Donnie joins Kevin Walsh on Money Line at 11 a.m. Eastern, followed by Football Full Circle at noon Eastern. Kaplan and crew join the party at 1 p.m. Eastern, and Pharrell Coast to Coast keeps things rolling from 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern. Get in the mix with Kevin Walsh and Game Time Decisions at 6 p.m. Eastern. Evenings simmer with Carver and Lisi, then boils over with Gabe Moritzi on Sports Rage Late Night at 10 p.m. Eastern. To find out where to find SportsGrid that's best for you, go to sportsgrid.com. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
How would you like to get high-speed internet for your home for less than $2 a day? That's right. For about $50 a month, you'll get lightning-fast internet. Are you paying less than $50 a month right now for your internet? Then call Whole Home Connect right now for blazing fast internet at $50 a month with no price increases, no hidden fees, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees. It's a great deal. And guess what? You can try it for 15 days. If you don't like it, you get your money back. But you're gonna love it, and you're gonna love the price. Internet for your home for $50 a month. That's less than $2 a day. Plus, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees, and our 15-day guarantee. Call now. 800-797-1292. 800-797-1292. 800-797-1292. That's 800-797-1292.
Think of us as your cool roommate that has this innate gift of somehow always picking winners and never bugs you about doing the dishes or paying rent. Sports gaming strategies and information 24/7.
Get the winning edge.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
We are on the eve of history. It is almost Christmas Eve. That is the feeling that it has for tomorrow, Friday, December 20th, the first ever game day in the history of the 12-team college football playoff. The first ever game in the 12-team era. The first ever playoff game in the history of college football played on a college campus. Tomorrow night in South Bend, Indiana, under the watchful eye of Touchdown Jesus. It's the number 7 seed, Notre Dame. It's the 10 seed, Indiana, in an in-state showdown in the first ever CFP game in the 12-team field. Lisi Guy, let's look at the numbers. Notre Dame is more than a touchdown favorite at home, laying 7.5 against the Hoosiers. Total stands at 51 and a hook. Indiana, Joe, has only been an underdog one other game this year against Ohio State in that step-up spot that, frankly, Indiana fell flat. Notre Dame against teams not from the Mid-American Conference, downright dominant this season. What is Joe Lisi expecting for the first ever college football playoff game in the 12-team era tomorrow night in South Bend?
I think it's a very close game. I think it's a lower scoring game. I think Notre Dame might prevail, but I'm inclined to take Indiana plus the 7.5. Again, Kurt Cignetti in terms of this type of setting on the road. Again, playing in this type of atmosphere, give him the slight edge in terms of the head coaching advantage. And again, I still think from the fact that Indiana is positive in turnover margin, plus 14 this year, that can carry on the road. Again, they have a veteran quarterback. Give me Notre Dame 24-20, but a lower scoring game, and Indiana covers.
Yeah, Joe, I wonder how the offense looks tomorrow. Because again, Notre Dame against non-MAC foes has been absolutely elite. 9-0-1 against the spread, an average victory margin of better than 29 points per game, an offense that is averaging more than 43 points per game, what would be second best in the country, only behind Miami. And Notre Dame overall this year is still the third best scoring offense with the 10th best rushing offense in all of college football. And oh, by the way, the Fighting Irish, pretty sound defensively as well. But Indiana defensively, not half bad. In fact, not bad, darn good. Best rushing defense in all of college football, allowing fewer than 71 points per game. But Joe, the question to me on if Indiana can keep this game close, if IU can keep this game within that touchdown and a hook margin, is not so much the defense. It's Indiana's offense that was putrid against Ohio State. Less than 150 total yards in that matchup against the Buckeyes. They only had 246 of total yardage production against Michigan. Curtis Rourke, Lacey guy against Ohio State, just 68 yards passing. In Notre Dame is the third best passing defense in all of college football. I need to see IU's offense led by the Maple Missile, who is not scared of any stinking cold weather, and Mike Shanahan coordinating an effective scheme outside of the opening offensive possession for Indiana to attack Notre Dame. Here's where the Irish struggle slightly, Joe, defending the rushing game. They allow more than 123 yards per game. I would expect a lot of Tyson Lawton and Justice Ellison tomorrow for the Hoosiers.
Yeah, I really think they run the football, Ben. I mean, that is the biggest thing. I think they run it. I don't know if they want to get into a higher scoring game like they have played, in recent games. You look at how that game played out against Ohio State. They try to get it low scoring, and then Ohio State pulled away because the talent was there. Notre Dame is not that type of team, right? They want to run the football, play sound defense. Riley Leonard, good, not elite, playing much better in the passing attack. But I agree with you. If Indiana can run the football effectively, they're going to be within margin. The biggest thing is the strength of Notre Dame is that secondary. 17 interceptions, 48% completion percentage. You do not want to chuck it all over the yard against the Fighting Irish. Get a lower scoring game. You have a shot to pull it out.
And even just two teams running the football, if there's not a ton of explosive plays on the ground, and both pretty good at limiting the opposition, we're grinding out clock. Maybe we're keeping things under 51.5. Notre Dame, like I mentioned, in their 10 games against non-MAC foes, over in 7 of those 10. Indiana did go over against Ohio State because of a late rushing touchdown for the Buckeyes. He's Joe Lisi. I'm Ben Stevens. There is so much to get to tomorrow on a Football Friday. We'll preview all of Week 16 in the CFP. We'll talk to you then, noon Eastern time on SportsGrid Radio.
Now you've done it.
You found the advantage for gaming, odds,
and more.
But we call it the winning edge for short. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.